Welcome to Think Tech on OC16, Hawaii's weekly newscast on things that matter to tech and to Hawaii. I'm Anu Hittle.
And I'm Maryann Sasaki.
In our show this time, we'll cover a talk by Jim Kelly, former Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs.
The talk gave us insight into current Sino-American relations and was presented at a recent monthly meeting of the Harvard Club.
Jim Kelly was Assistant U.S. Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs from 2001 to 2005.
From 1994 through 2001, Kelly was president of Pacific Forum here in Honolulu. Pacific Forum has been a think tank on Asia-Pacific political, security, and economic issues since 1975.
Kelly served in the White House as Special Assistant for National Security Affairs to President Ronald Reagan and as Senior Director for Asian Affairs of the National Security Council from 1986 to 1989.
He was at the Pentagon as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs in East Asia and the Pacific from 1983 to 1986.
Kelly earned an MBA from Harvard Business School in 1968. He graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1959 and the National War College in 1977. He served in the U.S. Navy from 1959 to 1982.
After an introduction by Archie Kale, Vice President of Activities of the Harvard Club of Hawaii, Kelly gave a highly informed and thought-provoking report on Sino-American relations, one of the most intriguing relationships in our national history and one of the most challenging relationships in our national future.
Kelly is a frequent speaker and writer about economic and political issues involving East Asia and the Pacific. His remarks are always likely to stimulate important questions and high-level discussion on foreign policy, and his talk at the Harvard Club was no exception.
Our topic is China, cooperative, competitive, or adversarial, or all of the above. And I'll try to go through some of the dilemmas that China faces and that others in the world with China also face. Recent articles and commentary have questioned the long-established American-China policy of engagement with China. The terms most frequently used, cooperative, comprehensive, constructive. The last 8 presidents have, after painful processes, generally ended up about in the same place with respect to an engagement with China. Now there's at least there's more advocacy, setting aside current political campaigns, there's more advocacy for a tougher and more competitive or even an adversarial approach to China. We've had rebalancing and hedging, but some seek a greater change of policy now. And the reality is extremely complex. There are some things about China's behavior that are very positive and some that are outright bad. But we Americans and every other major country have to deal with China as it is. Moreover, we all have a stake in a successful China because a broken China would be a disaster for us and everybody else. And we'll get into that later on. Economic and political issues, I'll try to go through various of these, but particularly on the economic issue side, this is something that's enormously complicated. Within the last year, global confidence has been shaken in China's effectiveness in managing its economy. We have, in fact, substantial major capital flight from China. We have growth figures declared just a couple weeks ago at the National People's Congress. Prime Minister Lee estimated that China's growth in the next couple or 3 years would be between 6.5 and 7%, which is down from what it has been, but considerably more than many experts believe is likely. So we have declared an real growth contrasting. We have an enormously expanding debt in China. Not so much just government debt, but debt of non-banks, debts of local governments, debts of put together lending institutions. And most of the borrowers most of the investors in these view these as all being supported by the full faith and credit of the government of China. And so far that has worked out. But the bet levels are now exceeding even those of Japan at 2.5 times the GDP of China. And then we have these currency value issues we'll talk about a little bit later. And of course, stock prices were told to go up. And as so often with stock prices, they didn't go up, they went down. And that in particular, although not all that important in the sense of the whole Chinese economy, signaled the world a signal of lack of confidence. So to summarize of where we are with China, or where China has become, it's become a global power, although in many ways it still sees itself as a regional leader, and it's also, for the first time in its long history, a new maritime power. China's rise is really a restoration, because in all of economic history, all of global history, China has been number one very often in these things. China's economic growth since 1978 has been essentially without compare, remarkable, nowhere in the entire history of the world. And as a result, the economy of China is now, at least nominally, over $11 trillion a year. The U.S. economy is $18 trillion a year, and if you put it in these terms of what a person can buy or what a business can buy, it's probably much higher, quite comparable with the U.S. economy. The third economy in the world, Japan, is still well under $5 trillion. So the U.S. and China's economies in the world are really dominating factors that are here. China's foreign exchange reserves, I had done a talk not long ago. I noticed I had been estimating them at $3.5 trillion. They're in fact about $3.2 trillion because China has been dropping 100 million every month in recent months trying to support the value of its currency. And currency valuations is a true puzzle, especially given political candidates in the U.S. who believe that China's currency is incredibly overvalued, even though it is depreciated some 30% against the U.S. dollar in recent years, and China is investing 100 million a month to keep it from going lower, and lower would help China's exports. And so we really have a puzzle here that's awfully complex, and certainly more complex than any electorate should be expected to identify. Candidates ought to be held to a higher standard, but not in the U.S. Per capita, by the way, of that foreign exchange reserve, about $1.5 trillion of that is in U.S. Treasury instruments. So all of us have a financial stake, or rather China has a financial stake in the economic success of America. This interdependence is more than just a catchphrase. Per capita income of China, $7,000 over that this year across a population of 1.4 billion people. And its trade statistics lead just about every country in Asia and even Germany as well. We have an interesting leader in China now in Xi Jinping, a handsome man with an attractive spouse. Mr. Xi was born to privilege in that his father was a senior cadre under Mao. Both he and his family went through tough days in the Cultural Revolution, the 1966-76 period of enormous upheaval in China. And clearly, this had to affect anyone who lived through it, and I think it clearly affects Mr. Xi. His rise through the Communist Party of China has been steady, also solid and domestic with little international involvement. A contrast with his immediate predecessors, who were more collective leaders, he is clearly the maximum leader of China now, and certainly for a while to come, and we'll talk about that. When he took office in 2012, he seized his authority immediately. And in particular, he put his most capable vice premier in charge of the anti-corruption program. And everyone knows that corruption has been a plague on China from time immemorial, and certainly is major within modern China. But there's a real question of whether this is aimed at particular sets of elites or whether it's aimed across the board. And it is certainly being used to extend off into the hard line on reformers that really have nothing to do with the corruption issue. Mr. Xi has certainly fostered an intense nationalism and economic reform, but that latter within particular limits. Succession. China, of course, is the first Chinese authoritarian country to have steadied into a predictable succession process, which is how Mr. Xi came to power, and he is entitled to be president of China over two 5-year periods beyond Chinese party congresses. The next Congress is in 2017, next year, latter part of the year. 5 of the 7 members of the Standing Committee of the Politburo, which are the 7 people, if it were more collective, that were running China, are due to retire, and only 2, Premier Li Keqiang and Xi Jinping, are supposed to remain. This brings in a very interesting question, because the premier in recent governments has been the key economic leader of China. But unquestionably, Mr. Xi is leading the economy as well as everything else, and his people and his offices, as opposed to those of the premier, are running that process. And so it will be interesting to see in 2017 if Mr. Li continues. The speech on the economy given to the National People's Congress just a couple weeks ago was by Premier Li. And if it is seen to not make that, well, he may be sacrificed. So the real question then comes up, because clearly a cult of the personality in terms of public appearances is starting to be regenerated in China. Is Mr. Xi Jinping going to step down in 2022? This is a question that cannot be uttered within China. We can utter it here, but nobody in China or out really knows the answer to that, and it's an enormously important question about the future of China. Key issues, especially involving the USA, just to run through an index of these. North Korea on the political side has certainly been more recently a major issue. China does not appreciate North Korea very much. They certainly do not favor all these games with nuclear weapons and testing of nuclear weapons and testing of intercontinental or long-range ballistic missiles. But at the same time, China, above all, favors stability. It does not want an unstable situation in North Korea, and it also doesn't appreciates having a buffer state, especially given the vigor in South Korea as well. So there are some inherent difficulties there. I think the government would count it, the U.S. government would count it as a plus, though, that the recent sanctions initiative from the UN Security Council was supported by both China and Russia and the USA. We'll just have to see how that is implemented, because in the end, on sanctions in North Korea, it begins and ends with China. If China supports them, they can be whatever they say. If China doesn't support them, they become just words. South China Sea is an important issue. Some would say that it's the maximum issue. I don't agree with that. We have an enormous array of important issues, and that's what's different in this case than in so many other things that we've had. Admiral Harris recently used the word destabilizing militarization of these islands and rocks in the South China Sea. I think that's quite accurate. Construction and claims, the freedom of navigation issues are important. In a larger sense, this is really about long-term hegemony over the region and the control of China within what it calls the first island chain, running all the way from Japan on down to Indonesia. The Philippines' law of the sea challenge to China in the tribunals of the law of the sea is very important, and we should hear some results of that within a few months. China has made clear that they don't tend to honor any results of that court, but it's going to have some considerable significance. And so we're going to be hearing a lot for a long time over the South China Sea issues. China's slowdown in its growth that I mentioned earlier and its economic effects, it's clearly affected everyone in Asia, since they're all leading trading partner is China. Many of the Southeast Asian countries and Japan itself have been providing components that were turned into finished goods within China. This is clearly slowing down. This currency valuation issue, intellectual property, and then political cooperation on other problems in the world. China's a Security Council member, and that coordination, ISIS, Syria, Iran, all of these are important and all involve various challenges in making sure that China and the U.S. are at least on the same book, if not on the same page. Climate change cooperation has been strong recently, particularly built on the Paris conference. There are some reasons I'll get into a little bit later on. The cyber issue is huge, and we just toss it off as cyber is one of those issues. And then, of course, the human rights and restrictions that pending legislation in China may have on non-government organizations that have persisted in China and that are trying to build civil society. Civil society is a bad word to the Communist Party.
It seems like we're just being robbed of so much. And is it ineptitude on the American side, or is it really more cunning, well-executed plans on the Chinese side?
I would say that the cyber problem and threat that you and your friend described is less taking away secrets, official secrets of the United States to the extent that they're worth protecting. Many more are protected than need to be protected, but I think they're fairly well protected. The problem is technical information of 1,000 kinds from all over, from civilian businesses, from government and private laboratories, from all of that sort of thing. I think there has been an awful lot of that has gone on. Others of it has not been just cyber penetrations, but businesses that had to bring their trade secrets over to China, couldn't resist making a big agreement, have a joint venture partner, and then the joint venture breaks up later on, and they find a factory making something very similar to what they had. It's part of the overall picture, and yes, and I think China itself would view that that it's a responsibility of a country to keep its secrets. And I think, by the way, the U.S. government apparently, the Office of Personnel Management, for example, probably half the people here, if you ever had submitted anything for a U.S. government, all of this stuff was taken off the OPM registers. I now have 2 different cyber protector bureaucracies that will guard my emails. And I've had the same email address for 25 years. I think it's, I don't put anything on it that I don't want the Chinese or the North Koreans to read.
Jim Kelly lives in Honolulu and is a central figure in our active and retired military and diplomatic communities. It's great that we have this kind of global expertise in Hawaii. Kelly and his colleagues are a huge resource for Hawaii, and it's wonderful to have him here to help us understand global affairs. Thanks to Jim Kelly, the Harvard Club and Architects Hawaii, for presenting and hosting this talk and allowing us to attend. We are greatly appreciative for the opportunity to share and participate in the monthly discussions organized by the club.
And now let's take a look at our ThinkTech calendar of events going forward.
ThinkTech broadcasts its talk shows live on the internet from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekday afternoons. And then we broadcast our earlier shows all night long. And some people listen to them all night long. If you missed a show or you want to replay or share any of our shows, they're all archived on demand on thinktechhawaii.com and YouTube. For our audio stream, go to thinktechhawaii.com/radio.
Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our weekly calendar and our live stream and YouTube links, or better yet, sign on to our email list and get the daily docket of our upcoming shows.
ThinkTech has a high-tech green screen video studio at Pioneer Plaza. We invite you to come down, see our studio, and join our live audience. Contact Jay at thinktechhawaii.com.
Go ahead, give us a thumbs up on YouTube or send us a tweet at ThinkTechHI. We want to know what you're thinking and how you feel about current issues and events affecting Hawaii. We want you to stay in touch with us, and we want to stay in touch with you. Let's think together.
Did you know that ThinkTech is now broadcasting 30 live talk shows a week? Check them out. Here are some of the great shows and show hosts we've added over the last few months.
Join us and raise your awareness about the critical changes affecting and taking place in Hawaii. See what's going on. Be a part of the conversation and check it out at thinktechhawaii.com.
Want to speak out about a community issue? ThinkTech invites you to come down to our studio and make a video at our speaker's corner. Contact Jay at thinktechhawaii.com.
Want to join the conversation? Now you can call in and be included in our live shows. While you're watching any of our live shows, just call our hotline, 415-871-2474, and you can pose a question or make a comment. We look forward to getting your call.
We'll be right back to wrap up this week's edition of Think Tech. But first, we want to thank our underwriters. Okay, Maryann, that wraps up this week's edition of Think Tech. Remember, you can watch Think Tech on OC16 several times every week. Can't get enough of it, just like Jay Fidel does. For additional times, check out oc16.tv.
For lots more Think Tech videos and for underwriting and sponsorship opportunities on Think Tech on OC16, visit thinktechhawaii.com. Be a guest or a volunteer, a producer or an intern, and help us reach and have an impact on Hawaii.
Thanks so much for being part of our Think Tech family and for supporting our open discussion of tech, energy, diversification, and globalism in Hawaii. You can watch this show throughout the week and tune in next Sunday for our next important weekly episode. I'm Anu Hittle.
And I'm Maryann Sasaki. Aloha.
Oh.